Welcome to Beyond the Call, where history, leadership, and heroism come alive. Today's story explores Private First Class George Benjamin Jr. on Leyte in 1944, a powerful account of courage and responsibility in combat. If you enjoy learning more about military history and extraordinary individuals, you can find more articles, podcasts, and resources at Trackpads.com. The rain-soaked hills of Leyte were already scarred by days of fighting when Company A of the 306th Infantry pushed forward toward a stubborn Japanese strongpoint. A single light tank led the way up a narrow approach meant to smash machine gun nests that were dug into the slopes above. Behind it, a line of infantrymen tried to follow, knowing that if the tank stopped, they would be left exposed on the bare hillside. Enemy guns opened with brutal precision, raking the ground in front of and behind the tank, pinning men to the earth. Mortar rounds began to fall, and what had been a planned advance turned into a desperate struggle just to move a few yards. The attack was starting to die in the open. In the relative shelter of the rear moved Private First Class George Benjamin Jr., the company's radio operator. The heavy set on his back made him the vital link between the front and the officers trying to control the battle. He could see the tank slowing, the riflemen hesitating, and the invisible arc of fire that seemed to lock the whole formation in place. As a radio man, he could have stayed down and focused only on messages. Instead, he understood that the real message was written in the stalled line ahead. Someone had to get the attack moving again. Benjamin rose into the storm of bullets and began to run toward the tank. With his pistol in hand and the radio slamming against his shoulders, he waved for the infantrymen to get up and follow. He moved alongside the vehicle, where the ground was already known to be dangerous, and shouted for the crew to keep going. Seeing him take that risk, other soldiers left their shallow cover and pushed forward behind him, using the tank as a moving shield. The machine lurched ahead again, and the attack, which had been on the edge of collapse, began to creep toward the strongpoint. One man's decision had changed the shape of the fight. To understand how George Benjamin reached that moment, it helps to look back to his life before Leyte. He was born in 1919 in Philadelphia and grew up in a working-class environment shaped by the hardships of the Great Depression. As a young man, he moved across the river into New Jersey, graduated from Woodbury High School, and settled in Carneys Point. Like many of his generation, he saw the storm of war gathering overseas and felt the pull of service. In August 1943, at 24 years old, he entered the United States Army, trading familiar streets for barracks, drill fields, and the demanding world of infantry training. The Army trained Benjamin not only to handle a rifle, but also to operate a radio, a task that required both technical skill and a steady temperament. A radio operator carried more than extra weight. He carried the thin thread of communication that kept scattered units tied to their commanders. With Company A of the 306th Infantry Regiment in the 77th Infantry Division, he learned to work in terrain where hills, trees, and ridges could cut signals as easily as they blocked sight. By the time his division landed in the Philippines, he had become the man leaders depended on when they needed to be heard in the chaos of battle. Beyond the Call is the Monday feature of Dispatch, U.S. Military History magazine. His calm under pressure was already part of the unit's rhythm. The Leyte campaign tested that rhythm every day. The island's interior was a maze of steep slopes, ravines, and dense vegetation that turned each advance into a close fight at short distances. Japanese units had dug bunkers and firing points into the high ground, creating strong points that could stop whole companies if they were not cracked quickly. On the morning of his final action, Benjamin's company moved toward one of those positions. Their mission on paper, simple but brutal in reality. They had to silence the guns that dominated an approach route so that the larger battalion could pass. Every man in the line knew that if they failed, others would have to pay the price on another attempt. When the enemy opened fire, everything happened at once. Machine guns tore into the narrow route, forcing men to hit the dirt or risk being cut down as they walked. Mortars arced overhead and crashed into the hillsides, throwing fragments of metal and earth through the air. The tank crew, suddenly uncertain about advancing without close infantry support, began to hesitate. In that confusion, the attack started to unravel, as small groups of soldiers lost sight of one another, and the uphill momentum faded. It is in moments like this, when a plan breaks apart, that individual choices matter most. Benjamin saw the danger clearly. His response was simple and direct. He ran forward through the same fire that had pinned others, closing the gap with the tank. Standing beside the armored hull, He encouraged the crew to keep driving and urged nearby riflemen to rise and move with him. The sight of a radio operator, a man whose main tool was supposed to be his handset, leading from the front, had a powerful effect on the rest of the company. Men who had been flattened against the ground began to follow, drawing confidence from his example. The tank and its escort of infantry pushed closer to the enemy strongpoint, trading distance for risk with every yard they gained. The attack was alive again. Then the situation took a deadly turn. Japanese fire struck the tank, and in a moment the company's spearhead became a nightmare of flame and smoke. Fire licked over the vehicle, and smoke began to pour from its hatches. Inside, the crew were stunned and in danger of being trapped as ammunition cooked in the rising heat. Under continued enemy fire, many soldiers might have pulled back and written the vehicle off as a loss. Benjamin did not. He saw men, not just metal, in danger of being killed where they sat. That recognition drove what he did next. He climbed onto the burning tank, exposing himself again on ground the enemy already had sighted. Working the hatches open, he helped drag the dazed crew out and guided them toward what little cover a nearby ditch could offer. Only when they were clear of the immediate flames did he face his next decision. The tank still burned, and the ammunition inside was heating toward a catastrophic explosion that could spray fragments across the very soldiers who had just followed him forward. The safest thing he could have done was to stay in that ditch with the crew and let the fire run its course. Instead, he turned back toward the blaze. Benjamin climbed onto the tank once more and went inside in an effort to fight the fire or reach the ammunition. He knew exactly how dangerous this was. He had already seen what the enemy guns and the flames could do. Yet in his judgment, the risk of doing nothing was worse. The official Medal of Honor citation later described his actions as displaying conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, words that can sound distant until you picture a single soldier disappearing into a burning vehicle under fire. Moments later, the ammunition inside exploded. The tank was torn apart in a violent blast that killed him instantly and left no doubt about the force he had been trying to contain. The citation's language about complete disregard for his own safety becomes clearer when viewed through this sequence of choices. As a radio operator, Benjamin's assigned role was already dangerous, but it did not require him to lead assaults or climb into burning tanks. At every critical point, he went beyond what his job description demanded. He rallied men when the attack faltered, rescued the crew when their vehicle became a trap, and returned to the danger to protect those who had followed him. Above and beyond the call of duty is not just a phrase in his case. It is a literal description of how far he pushed himself for others. The impact of his actions spread far beyond the scorched ground where he fell. Tactically, his leadership kept the attack from failing in the open and helped Company A move closer to its objective. His rescue of the tank crew preserved trained soldiers who could fight another day, rather than losing them in a single blast. By attempting to prevent the explosion, he tried to shield his comrades from a secondary disaster that could have shattered the company and forced the battalion to halt its advance. In the context of the Leyte campaign, each successful assault on a strongpoint contributed to the slow but steady erosion of Japanese defenses on the island. His sacrifice helped maintain that momentum. After the war, his story traveled from that hillside in the Philippines back to New Jersey and to the broader record of the Army's campaign in the Pacific. He was posthumously awarded the Medal of Honor, and communities in his home state honored him as one of their own, who had given his life far from the places where he had grown up. His name appeared on local memorials and in programs that marked the service and sacrifice of those who did not return. For students of military history, his actions at Leyte stand as a vivid example of what those formal words in a citation actually mean when translated into human decisions under fire. His legacy lives not only in metal and stone, but in the way his choices continue to be studied and remembered. Today, when we speak of Private First Class George Benjamin Jr., we are not just reciting the details of an award. We are recalling a young man who carried a radio into battle and, in the crucial minutes of a stalled attack, chose to lead, to rescue, and finally to risk everything to protect his comrades. His courage reminds us that leadership often emerges from those who do not hold formal authority but understand what must be done in the moment. His story encourages listeners, whether they wear a uniform or not, to think about how they might respond when others depend on their choices. In that sense, his actions on Leyte still echo far beyond that rain-soaked hillside in 1944.